Yo, check this out. Today we're watching 4 cold cases everyone gave up on that just got solved. So we're about to find out about kids that went missing but were just found recently. This is about to be creepy. Try not to get scared. Let's go.
In 2025,
all right, here we go.
Dozens of cold cases were finally given their time in the
2025
solved thanks to forensic advancements and genetic genealogy testing.
Yeah, technology is just getting better and better. So when they have these crime scenes with like evidence and they keep them stored in like bags and stuff for like decades and so many years. And then every once in a while, some detectives will go back into these cases and they'll scan the evidence for DNA that they can actually like find now because of the technology. I don't know, it's crazy, but this is cool. Let's see.
While we're only a few months into 2026, it seems likely that this year will go just as well, if not even better, for the victims of unsolved crimes and their families, who have long awaited answers.
All right, let's get into the first one.
Cynthia Gonzalez.
Okay.
25-year-old Cynthia Gonzalez worked as an exotic dancer at the time of her death. She was last seen on September 17th, 1991, when she left her home in Arlington, Texas, to meet with a client as part of a private event she'd agreed to work. However, Cynthia never returned home that night. She was subsequently reported missing by her ex-husband, and while her car was found a few hours later, there was no trace of the 25-year-old. 5 days passed before a nude body was found on a rural property in the south of the city.
Found her body with no
the
clothes
victim
on.
was identified as Cynthia, and it was discovered that she'd suffered multiple gunshot wounds. For decades, Cynthia's case has remained unsolved. Though there were a few leads early on in the investigation, many of these were dead ends, causing the case to stall. Additionally, investigators at the time struggled with a lack of evidence. The Texas heat, combined with rainstorms in the aftermath of her murder, had caused the body to badly decompose, meaning it was difficult to tell if assault was a part of the case.
That's crazy.
And there was no means of collecting potential evidence that the killer may have left behind.
So how did they
In September of 2024, however, everything changed. A criminology professor at the University of Texas, Patricia Eddings, suggested that a small number of her students helped the police with their caseload. She got the idea after a homicide detective explained to her students that cold cases were very difficult to work on, as the Arlington police had no specific cold case unit, and it was difficult to make time for them when they had to prioritize newer investigations.
Makes sense. Yeah, they can't really go back and worry about these mysteries that haven't been solved because they've got stuff that needs solved right now. So this teacher in her class, she taught about like criminology, which is like the study of I don't know, whatever. They decided to help go look at the cold cases and stuff. That's dope.
Patricia had once worked as a forensic analyst and subsequently made the proposal to Arlington police, her students, and her department. It seemed like a win-win situation for all involved. The criminology students were soon given boxes of case files, witness statements, lab reports, and crime scene photos, which they diligently scoured through in order to find a lead that may have been missed by investigators. The students noticed that the name of a woman had come up repeatedly in the original investigators' notes. They then asked police if her DNA and prints had ever been taken, or if she'd ever been interviewed. This prompted detectives to re-examine the information they had about the woman. They discovered that she had indeed been interviewed in 1991, and again in 1993, after 2 men separately came forward to tell authorities that she had confessed to Cynthia's murder. The woman was identified as Janie Perkins.
What?
Detectives finally realized they were onto something big. While reading through the statements of those 2 men, authorities discovered that one of them had been dating Perkins, but had met Cynthia and fallen in love with her. He broke things off with Perkins to pursue a relationship with Cynthia, something that reportedly enraged Perkins. Notably, she had no alibi for the night of the murder, and she failed 2 separate polygraph tests. The authorities believe that no arrests were made in 1993 because there was no forensic evidence to tie Perkins to the scene, and polygraph tests are inadmissible in court due to their unreliable nature. Finally, on November 6th, 2025, Janie Perkins, now 63, was arrested for Cynthia's murder. Cynthia's daughter, Jessica, who was 6 when her mother was killed, stated, "I am so grateful for this program and so proud of these students at UTA. and so thankful for the time they have spent and the effort they put into this case.
That's awesome, bro.
Notably, that same class of students who uncovered Perkins' connection to the case is now working on 2 other cold cases.
Next. Okay, here's the next one.
Bryant Keith Bates. 21-year-old Bryant Keith Bates was last seen on November 15th, 1988, when he left his home in Northeast Lake, Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
He was supposed to attend a friend's funeral that morning, but he never returned afterwards. His family reported him missing to the Birmingham PD a short time later. Reportedly, early on in the investigation, friends and family had expressed their fears that Bryant might have been murdered, and as the days passed, the police began to suspect that they were right. Still, there were very few leads in the case, and there was no evidence available to indicate what might have happened to the 21-year-old that November day. 16 years later, in November 2004, an exterminator working on a rental property in Southeast Lake discovered a human skeleton inside a coal bin located in a crawl space beneath the home. The remains were subsequently sent to the Jefferson County Coroner Medical Examiner's office, where both a forensic pathologist and a forensic anthropologist examined them.
Wow.
They concluded that the body belonged to a man who stood around 5 foot 10 inches tall, was of African descent, and aged between 17 and 30. Some of the clothing recovered included plaid trousers, argyle socks, and a white and blue shirt. A yellow metal chain necklace and a Coca-Cola brand watch were also found.
Okay.
The victim's cause of death was obvious. He had died from a gunshot wound to the head.
Wow.
For years, nothing further happened with the remains. In 2015, the details of the body were entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, but still, they remained unidentified. 3 years later, a bone sample was submitted for DNA analysis to the University of Texas Center for Human Identification.
Okay.
The profile was entered into CODIS, but no match was found.
That's the thing with like DNA testing. They have to have your DNA in the first place. You can't just find someone's DNA and then know exactly who it is. You have to be able to match it to DNA that you already have. So like that's the hard part about it, man.
A second bone sample was sent to Othram Inc., the genetic genealogy company, which finally tested it in 2025, helping investigators to narrow down the pool of potential identities. Finally, in February 2026, investigators announced that the remains belonged to 21-year-old Bryant Keith Bates. They had taken DNA from his immediate family members to confirm the match. But while, after 38 years, Bryant has finally been found, there are still questions in his case.
Yeah,
and
what
detectives are
happened?
actively investigating his murder. Anyone with information about his death can contact the Birmingham PD Homicide Unit at 205-254-1764.
Do that. Okay, next one. Let's go.
Maricela Rocha. On July 18th, 1980, the body of a young woman was discovered in the car park of Westlake High School in Westlake, California.
High school.
She was initially believed to have been a mannequin, and her end had been a horrifically violent one.
Oh my
She
God.
had been raped, stabbed around 29 times, and strangled. The evidence showed that she'd put up a ferocious fight against her attacker,
Why does it look
with
like
defensive
AI?
wounds marring the skin on her hands and arms. The perpetrator's DNA was found under her fingernails. Adding to the tragedy was that Jane Doe was pregnant at the time of her demise. Authorities determined that the young woman had been killed just hours before she was found, and that she'd been murdered elsewhere before her body was dumped in the car park.
What?
Investigators described the woman as having black hair with blonde dye on the ends, brown eyes, pierced ears, an episiotomy scar which indicated that she'd given birth before, birthmarks on her face, a mole below her left index finger, and scars on her left knee. They initially
you didn't know
theorized
who
that she'd
it
been
was.
taken from Los Angeles, Kern, or Ventura counties, and that she may have been hitchhiking. It's unclear why authorities suggested these possibilities, but they were perhaps based on witness sightings. For decades, the case remained unsolved, and it wasn't until 2012 that a break finally came when the case of the Ventura County Jane Doe was linked to that of Kern County Jane Doe No. 5. The second Jane Doe had been found dead in an almond orchard in Delano, California on July 14, 1980, just days before the Ventura County Jane Doe's murder.
Wow.
She had been killed similarly, having been raped raped and stabbed several times. Jane Doe 5 had been connected to 56-year-old Wilson Choust in 2008 via DNA.
What?
Choust was serving a life sentence in a state prison for various counts of kidnapping, robbery, and
He was
that had
already
taken
locked
place
up.
between August and September
And they found
1980.
more, bruh.
However, no charges were filed at the time, as Kern County did not want to pursue the case without the name of the victim. 4 years later, the cases of both Jane Does would be linked following DNA testing of their rape kits.
Wow.
Though both women were still unidentified, investigators decide to pursue charges against Choust. He was moved to Ventura County and charged with 3 counts of murder. In May
Good,
2018, he was convicted of the rape and murder of the 2 Jane Does.
That's crazy.
Notably, he was also tried for the murder of the Ventura County Jane Doe's unborn child, but was not found guilty. Nonetheless, Choust, who had been eligible for parole in 2017, was
Nope.
given 2 life sentences.
Good, bro.
Choust told investigators that Ventura County Jane Doe was a hitchhiker he had picked up in Visalia. He said that he'd met the Kern County Jane Doe 5 in a bar in Hanford. However, he was unable to provide detectives with their identities. Kern County Jane Doe number 5 remained nameless until 2021, when it was announced that she was Shirley Soucy, a member of the Samson Cree Nation in Alberta, Canada. She had
Okay.
lived a troubled life and eventually opted to leave Canada altogether. It would take another 5 years for Ventura County Jane Doe to be identified.
Wow.
In February of 2026, it was announced that she was a 22-year-old named Maricela Rocha. She was born in Monterrey, Mexico in 1958.
That's
At
crazy,
some
bro.
point-
All right, here we go. Then the next one.
Sarah Greer. 13-year-old Sarah Greer was last seen
13 years
alive
old,
on
bro.
May 23rd, 1982, when she left her friend's home in
1982?
Cloverdale, California, to walk downtown. The following morning, a fireman heading home from his shift found the young girl's body.
Dude.
Investigators later concluded that she had been raped and then strangled to death with her own shorts.
Come
She had likely
on.
been dragged down an alleyway to a secluded area near an apartment block and then behind a fence. The case was difficult to investigate early on due to the limited forensic techniques and technology of the 1980s. For over 20 years, there was virtually no movement in the case, and Sarah's murder was shelved, gathering dust until 2003, when a break finally came. A criminalist with the California
years
Department of
later.
Justice was able to develop a DNA profile using biological material collected from her underwear. However, the DNA did
Wow.
not match anyone in the police database.
Oh.
Another 18 years would pass before hopes were raised
Another
again
18
when the
years?
Cloverdale PD reached out to a private investigator and enlisted the aid of the FBI.
Wow.
Investigators hoped that the latter would be able to find a matching source to the DNA profile using genetic genealogy databases, which they had access to. In the following years, the FBI were able to narrow down their suspect pool to 4 brothers. They conducted surveillance on the brothers and were able to collect a cigarette butt that one of them had discarded.
Wow.
Testing showed that it was a match to the material found on Sarah's clothing. 64-year-old James Unick was arrested at his home in Willows, California in
Good,
July
bro.
of
That's
2024.
crazy.
He was charged with murder, kidnapping, and lewd and lascivious acts with a minor under the age of 14. He initially stated that he didn't
God.
know Sarah and that he didn't remember the events on the day she died. However, Unick would later change his story. During his month-long trial, jurors heard from Sarah's friends, as well as the defendant himself, who testified in his own defense. He claimed that the 13-year-old had propositioned him for sex and that they had consensual sex near the Russian
What?
River. He alleged that she must have been attacked by someone else. The
Bruh.
jury did not believe Unick's version of events, however.
No.
They spent 2 hours deliberating before returning a guilty verdict in February 2026. He is due to be sentenced in April this year.
That's disgusting, bro.